Hello, everyone. My name is Gil Panalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar, where every other Tuesday I invite fascinating people to share their stories on how to create cities that are more equitable, sustainable, playful. See, experiences that others can learn from, not as on the computers that we copy and paste, but yes, to adapt and improve because every city is different. I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities all over the world, small and large. And in this one, I have a special memory on the huge transformation. Today, the topic is going to be the new Reykjavik, the transformation of a young city. And my guest is a fabulous person. He's a medical doctor who went into politics and fell in love with the possibility to actually improve people's quality of life. It's Dr. Dagur Eggertsson, who was mayor from 2014 to 2024, a period of huge transformations in the capital city of Iceland. So, Dagur, thank you very, very much for having accepted the invitation. And we have hundreds and hundreds of people from all over the world, from multiple backgrounds, connected, wanting to learn from you. Mr. Dagur Eggertsson, Deputy Mayor of Reykjavik, welcome to our webinar.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor for me to be with you from Reykjavik and try in a short time to present the transformation of a young city. Well, thank you, and thanks for the honor of being with you. You're right. I was mayor from 2014 to January this year. I'm now currently serving as deputy mayor. But just to get the perspective, this is Reykjavik during night in the winter. This is the capital of Iceland, the northernmost capital in the world. So we're a Scandinavian country, a welfare country. But what's peculiar is that the lion's share of people live in or around Reykjavik. Around 82% of the population live within 1 hour's driving distance in many municipalities, but the Reykjavik is the capital. And you asked me to tell a little bit about myself. Well, I'm there in the front line in a white t-shirt, quite proud because we had got some medals for soccer. I'm the first mayor from the suburbs in the history of Reykjavik, and I actually think that you can just see from this picture the transformation that has been in the city. Of course, my life started earlier. I have a very smart mother, and this is me. She had this peculiar technique of holding me because the fact she was hiding is that I couldn't raise my head. I was just too large or lazy, but even that transformed. So when I moved to my childhood neighborhood town, I was like this. And my parents brought the bicycles on the top of their car. But at that time, they were the odd ones out because nobody was biking in Reykjavik. But if this were a lecture on Iceland, I would show you the contrast. Iceland went in 100 years from being one of the poorest nations in Europe to being one of the wealthiest. That is because of a lot of things, some natural resources, good water, and warm water. In 1933, Reykjavik had smog because people were still using coal to heat up the houses. But through that century, we hooked every house up to geothermal energy. the gold that was under our feet. That was a century of developing, and wealth didn't come with it instantly, but that has kept our energy prices low all this time, and 100% of electricity is produced in a green way in Iceland. It has also brought us quality of life and health, even mental health. You can see that in the neighborhood swimming pools. Every neighborhood has a public swimming pool, and there Icelanders meet not only to swim but to speak with each other. We even have a geothermal beach. Yes, the rest water is partly used to heat up the beach, but this is actually one of the best days of the year because we don't have that extravagant heat in Iceland, as you could realize from the name. But my story, yes, I transformed. These are teenagers that I grew up with and became a medical doctor. I was never going into politics, actually. I was and had a wonderful position lined up in Stockholm, where I was going to study infectious diseases and pandemics 20 years ago. But life is what happens while you're busy making other plans, and when me and my wife, who is a real doctor, got married, this picture was accidentally taken, and on the signpost above us, you see an arrow pointing to the city hall, Ráðhús as we call it. And that was some kind of faith, because I was hijacked into politics, so I decided to try it out, because the first female mayor of Reykjavik that broke many glass ceilings, Ingibjörg Sólrún Gísladóttir, got me into it, and I was thrilled by the number and power of strong women in Reykjavik politics. This is some of them. From where I was coming is this picture. This is actually at 3 at night. I was a teenager then, and we, the kids, flocked out in the streets of the city center, drinking and doing stuff. I remember having taken care of one of my friends in an alley close there where he was puking. Yes, these were the years when Icelandic teenagers were increasing their intake of alcohol. They smoked and tried narcotics more and more every year. And these powerful women in Reykjavik politics decided to turn that around. And to cut a long story short, we did, not just as politicians, but as a society. So in 13 years, Reykjavik went from having the highest numbers of teenage drinking, smoking, and use of drugs to the lowest numbers in Europe. And the interesting part of that story is that it was evidence-based, so we know why. We went from a policy that can be framed to tell teenagers to say no to drugs. It turns out that the conventional method of sending in an old rock star that tells about their drug life and how they got out of it actually was an advertisement for drugs, and another strategy was needed. We analyzed the whole environment of the kids growing up and defined risk factors and protective factors, and by strengthening the protective factors and working against the risk factors, we got those numbers down. Time spent with parents, the peer group, and participation in sports and leisure activities, extracurricular activities were the keys. And we did a lot to enforce this. We identified a voucher system, a leisure card, that gives families money to pay for sports or everything else, and gives us data to know who's participating and who's not. So we know what they're doing and in what field and in what neighborhoods are lagging behind. So this has been created in a consensus. So we actually spend more on sports and leisures than any other country I know per capita. And that is why we went through that successful journey of having the worst numbers to the best in 15 years. There are a lot of data and research on this, so you can easily find out more. But I would like to start in this short lecture on transformation to say that I think that we have transformed the environment for children. This is my old class, and we all look very sad, or at least serious. When I visit the schools now, it's something different, and I think that we have been able to create a very lively and more fun environment for the new generation. If you look to the schools, if you look to the leisure activities, dance or arts, or culture for children. But my main story here today is really to try to describe in this short presentation how it was to govern the city, first as deputy mayor from 2010 to 2014, and then for mayor for 10 years. It's kind of governing from crisis to crisis. The economic crisis in Iceland of 2008 was, I have to admit, world known because of its magnitude, and it was a big hit for a small country and its economy. So the first years we were not least dealing with unemployment and the economic backlash. The side story of this is that we lost trust in society, not least to conventional politics and the people that were governing the city at the time. So they were moved aside, and in came a well-known comedian and stand-up named Jón Gnarr. He won the election and became a mayor because I and my party started working with this group of new people, artists that had been active in other fields of society, and they came in and took over in the majority with us, the Social Democrats. This is actually a picture I love from the roof of one of the highest apartment buildings in Reykjavik. It's not only a bad hair day I'm having there, it's actually ashes from a volcanic eruption, Eyjafjallajökull, that stopped the flights over Europe for 10 days and made a lot of people angry. This is a very grey picture. This is a more picturesque picture of Eyjafjallajökull eruption from the site. And why am I taking this into it? Because Reykjavik and Iceland turned this very much public event, published event, the eruption, to a marketing thing. So one of the things that Reykjavik and Iceland did to get unemployment down and transforming the city was to market Reykjavik towards tourists. And what actually happened was that banks that had been a big part of our economy collapsed, and in came hotels instead. And we have examples of this all over, but the transformation was much deeper because we have a history of being based on fishing or based on aluminium smelters and then based on banks. But now we wanted to transform business and what we live from. So we started developing the city to cater for that. So these are before and after pictures from different sides of the city. And there at the harbor, you have a new hotel. We worked with the universities to build up knowledge-based industries with pharmaceuticals. And we started building up the university hospital to also support the build-up of life sciences. And we took an old fertilizer plant and turned into a studio, an international film studio. But we had a freezing housing and investment market. And I remember the first year we were governing Reykjavik in 2010, only 10 apartments started in building for a whole year. That's not enough, not even then. But what we were capable of was to get that going on a wide scale, and we have had increasing population on a large scale ever since. So the build-up in Reykjavik has been a lot in numbers, and I'm not going into that. I want to tell you that we felt we needed to transform how we were developing the city as well. My old icons were doctors 100 years ago that had been introducing concepts of good city and town planning in Iceland. They were inspired by the knowledge of that time of the importance of clean air and light. And they were studying how the sun falls on houses in Iceland and embraced the ideas of a garden city. And actually, a lot of neighborhoods from that time bear the influence of these medical doctors. But physicians had totally disappeared from the discussion on cities and planning for the time. But actually planning is what has kept me in city politics for all this time. One of the big inspirations were research coming out in the 2003 and 4 of Larry Frank of British Columbia, the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, that did some of the biggest research that had been taken there then on the effects of the built environment on health, and wrote several books and many articles about that. And what fascinated me was that there is actually a linear relationship, according to his and other studies, on the probability of obesity and how you plan the land use mix. So if there is a school near you or a local grocery store, there is increasing likelihood that you move and walk and bike and do not sit in the car all day. It's of course something we could talk about all day, how we plan healthy cities, but this inspired me and others on densifying Reykjavik, a city that had been sprawling since the 60s. So we went from kind of developing to the outside about 70 to 80% last 2 decades, to a goal of 90% of the development should be inwards and in densification. And so we did. We densified the city of Reykjavik with all the building projects needed, and we are still doing it. And actually, in surprisingly short time, 10 years, we saw density increasing from 42 individuals per hectare to 51 individual per hectare. And I'm going to show you some pictures. Some of the places we built up have been around the inner city airport, and we are continuing to build there. We had a lot of spaces around buildings that were going to be extended later, but when people have changed their minds, we use them to develop housing instead. And areas around the harbor were in special focus, not only for our concert and music hall, but also for housing, hotels, and mixed use. Old plots and underused car parks turned also into development, and the areas that had been kept unbuilt because of the fertilizer factory were also built up. But also brownfield in the city that we densified with housing, and brownfield in very nice places. And you can see those 2 squares also in the new picture, but we have a whole neighborhood that we have added. But we have to think about not only where to put the houses, but for whom. So we tried to transform the housing system that had been wrecked to a large extent when it comes to social housing around 2000, inspired by things happening under Thatcher in England. A lot of social housing was sold out, so we had to start with scratch. So a considerable part of what we have been building has been with the unions that have been kind of resurrecting social housing on a large scale, and other non-profits as well. And we have tried to have that a mixed use. So we have made agreements with all developers that have been building in recent years in Reykjavik, that part of every project is social housing. The students were very good in shuffling, so we doubled the number of student apartments the last 7 years, and they even look nice. We try to keep in mind to cater also for people with special needs. For example, people with disability. So we have had a special focus on that. And that is some of the most beautiful events that you can go to, is to give people independent living after having waited for a long time. But most of these projects are actually just mixed in the developments. And this is single units for homeless. It's a housing part of the Housing First policy. And now they're focusing more and more on the kind of generation that is becoming elder, because we see a demographic shift coming up. But we have talked about where to put the housing and what housing mix, but we have to think the transformation of transport into this, because we have a huge challenge when it comes to a different modal split, because Reykjavik was planned in the 60s as the perfect car-dependent city. It was to be based on the private car and industries. And this was the brave new world, and everybody was supporting it. And we were even going to take the downtown Reykjavik and place highways through it on 4 ways. Tear all the old houses down and build something new. We turned that totally around, and now we have a green plan, a master plan for Reykjavik, first to 2030 and then 40, and a regional plan that supports this. That has cut through all politics. We have managed to work with all party groups, mostly, not all of them, based on, like in the prevention work, on evidence, where we go through scenarios of how we can develop the Reykjavik area, how many people we have to cater for in the future. We have looked at how that went the last time we added 70,000 people to the area and the effects that had on traffic. And we know and have reached a consensus, almost a consensus, I would say, that we need to boost public transport. No surprise for people that follow this, but it's a huge political task to get support for that. So now we're planning a city line, which is transit-based development, integrated in transport planning and housing. And this would mean the transformation of public transport being built up in the next few years. So we are going from a situation where 19% of the inhabitants have good public transport within reach to 66% of the population. We are building up for biking as well. We are with a comprehensive net all over, and we have reached an agreement with the government in a package for the Reykjavik capital area of how we provide money for this. It is a huge task, but it's very important, and it's important that we think long-term and get good political support from many, so it will keep in times to come. But what also gives nutrition is to think about the transformation of public space while you're doing this project. We have talked about the 60s that envisioned a second level highway at the harbor, and then in the 90s it became a car park, and now it's a new part of downtown Reykjavik. We've seen all kinds of old houses get their original look through this, and we have actually loved building on car parks. If not housing, then squares for people. And here's the loved hot dog stand in Reykjavik that has got a nicer environment. We have also been investing heavily in making the suburbs and neighborhood in the outskirts nice, and investing for children, play and sports while we're doing that. And of course, kept the tradition of adding a new swimming pool when we add a new neighborhood. One of the innovations of Reykjavik has actually been a new layer of planning. So we have the master plan and then detailed plans, but in between we analyze each of the old neighborhoods and add in infills or green spaces or other things needed based on that analysis. But what I love my staff for is that they also have had eye for detail. So they have added a lot of flowers and green to the city, even in spaces that were only for cars. But then we have taken cars away and left them for children and their parents. both in the city center, but also been developing some projects in the suburbs. In COVID, we realized that all the bike infrastructure that we had set up were catering now for new groups that hadn't used them, and we are now exploring how to use the closeness of the sea to play more and live more. And although it's extremely cold, it's refreshing and has been gaining popularity for all generations. Children are in a special focus, and we have gone from banning biking to schools in many instances 15 years ago to setting up infrastructure and having up to 40 and 50% of kids coming by bikes in the months where we don't have snow. We are taking over the streets in a large extent, both temporary, but also with new design, where we're taking away parking and put something for people instead. And we are going to continue to do that in new projects in central Reykjavik, with the transformation that comes with the city line and its bus stops. We've transformed our old bus stops to food halls and places to meet, and old roads to pedestrian streets, old squares for cars to squares with people. And we are using that tone when we are adding to the city with new neighborhoods on older brownfields that we are planning and building up in the years to come. I see in the next years the big transformation will be connected to the introduction of the city line and the infrastructure that comes with it. We are sinking 2 highways in the process and creating spaces on ground for people. We are building a new bridge for the city line and walking and biking. And as you hear, I'm catching my breath here. And when I quit as mayor, I kind of felt like this boxer that this cartoon that made fun of me of one of the newspapers after the 10-year run. I actually caught arthritis while serving, but what gives you energy and makes it all worth it is, of course, the good people around you, your colleagues, the children you meet at schools. They start every morning in Lørenskole by singing wonderful songs. The infrastructure for kids that you see, the people you work with, the colors of the city, the energy on living in an open, free city for all, and the partying that follows it. It's, yes, all about the people. Thank you.
And this has been fascinating. We could go for another hour, but a last question. And I think it has been very useful because sometimes people think that the guests are from large cities. No, this is also a medium-sized city. And also sometimes people think the proximity, the 20-minute city, the 15-minute city is something new. No, most cities, I mean, Jane Jacobs 50 years ago, young girl, we're talking about this. Reykjavik in the last 20 years has been dealing with proximity. But yes, you are a medical doctor. You have a very different view. You have been mayor of Reykjavik for the last 10 years. So you have people here from over 30 countries. What is your call to action? What are the things that you have learned as a medical doctor? What is the role that you think public health can play? What has it played in Reykjavik, but also how can it play in the future? How can we engage more public health? What is the impact of all of these actions that you mentioned on mental health, on physical health, of people of all backgrounds? You mentioned children and elderly. So this is as a summary, as a closing, and as a call to action.
Yeah. I remember when I was asked to enter politics, and I wasn't sure because I was going to learn more medicine. But it was interesting, and I sat down and pointed out kind of the things I found interesting and important if I would do this, if I would enter politics. I think that none of these points were directly on planning. But only after 1 or 2 years of doing city politics, I realized that planning is not just the heart of how a city develops, if it is a city for all through mixed use and also social mixed use when you're planning for housing. It also has fundamental effects on how you feel, how you live, what the quality of life is, or what lack of quality there is in the life that the city. So it's probably speaking to the choir to say this to the group that is listening here, but planning has been what has been driving me, and kind of the instruments of planning, both knowing what you should not do and what to do and how to do it, and kind of to find political ways to gain support for the right things. My call to action is then that planners, transportation planners, and people that know how important climate issues are, use health more as a central argument to get people listening and get people kind of on board in doing the right thing. Because my experience is that health is so important to all of us and all families. So if you realize that some of the habits or planning or cityscape that the 20th century served us is bad for our health, and that we actually know a lot about what it is good for our health and what we should do to develop our cities to be more healthier, more interesting, and more fun. Remember health. Remember health as a goal, a part of a vision, but also as a tool of communication. Remember evidence, because there is a lot of it, and try to link that. That means also that when you're densifying, when you're putting in an infill, that you have to take into account where the next green area is, how that kind of whole area is still going to be great for people living there. So health in all arguments, and health at the core of what you're doing, saying, and developing as a mayor or as a planner or a specialist or a politician.
Thank you very, very much. What a wonderful call to action. And the people of Reykjavik have been lucky to have you as mayor the last 10 years. And your call to action of having health, because health is a unifier. Once you come to an agreement on health, then you can really say, okay, what's best? What action on this is best for mental and physical and social health? So I want to thank you, Dagur, very, very much. It has been fascinating. And everyone, I want to thank the hundreds of people that were connected. Please, in 2 days, you will have the recording and share it with decision makers, with advocates. And I thank you very much for everyone for showing up every other week. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about playgrounds, green playgrounds made out of wood, and the impact that it has, having children playing in nature. And we'll obviously talk about the impact on health. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
What a great presentation. Oh, so much to learn from. As an example, the fact that the youth, only 10 years ago, almost half of the young people, 44% to be exact, have been consuming alcohol, and most have been drunk over the last 30 days. Today is less than 5%. Huge. And it was not through more policing. Quite the opposite. It was about empowerment. It was about sports and recreation activities for everyone. And also how you densify the city center in order to have people with proximity to get everything, and how you work throughout the year in the outdoor and the public places, in the summer, in the winter. Great cities have to be good throughout the year. Thank you very much for a fabulous presentation, and the hundreds of people that connected live. Thanks for watching. And please tell others to connect every other Tuesday. And this recording, please share it with decision makers, with the media, with advocates, with anybody that you think could benefit from these fabulous experiences that we just learned from Reykjavik in Iceland, and how it was transformed and continues to be transformed, and how actually they are now sharing many of their experiences in other cities around the world, because this is something that good cities should do. Be generous, share what works for others to adapt and improve, and also what does not work in order for others to avoid. Thanks you very, very much, everyone, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, every other Tuesday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.